Why is it that it's so difficult for the Europeans to talk to Putin?
Yeah, well, I don't know, because it doesn't make sense. They have every reason to do it. It would be, if you love Ukraine above all, as I said, it would make perfect sense to talk with them, because it's only going to get worse. So it's, what can I say? It is just kind of a form of madness, and I wish I had some sort of, I could point to um, some rationality behind this, but I just don't see it. I just don't see it whatsoever. Because if it's Ukraine that you're worried about, if your own interests, your own economy, whatever, it just makes sense to talk to the Russians. And you might even hate the Russians, but it makes sense to make a deal with them. And you have to, you got to look at what's happened and how things have gone. You had opportunities to make deals. If you had taken those earlier, you would have been so much better off. Ukraine would have been so much better off. And with every month that passes, the situation gets worse. So what is it? Just as I said, if you're rational, okay, the only way you could justify that is that, okay, we have this great plan. Okay, things have been getting worse for the last 2.5 years or whatever, but we have this great plan and we're certain that we're going to turn things around and we're going to win this war. Well, what is that great plan? You don't have it. Your great plans have fallen flat on on their face. So, of course, there was the 2023 summer offensive. There was the Krinky debacle. There was the Kursk debacle. These are your great plans. So where is your great plan? Where's your wonder weapon? We've seen all those. One after another has been introduced, and each one of us has been neutralized. So you're asking us to believe this? How can you believe this yourself? That if you just kind of continue with your current losing course, somehow you're going to pull, snatch victory from the jaws of defeat. It's irrational. Really, just you can't just keep on stating these things like as long as it takes. Okay, well that's great. You have this wonderful rhetoric, but let's talk about reality. And they're divorced from reality. I mean, that's what can I say?
How will these nations, France, Germany, the UK, how will they handle a Ukrainian loss? Is it the longer that they keep on saying as long as it takes, eventually, the loss it'll just be so apparent. It's there. They have to accept it. Is it going to be very painful for them? Why is it is there some real consequences that they're going to suffer?
Right.
I mean,
Well,
personally,
really,
politically, I understand. But
yeah. Right. Yeah. Personally, politically, definitely could be consequences. I hope that the public, the European public has shown itself to be more realistic and more sensible than the political class. And maybe eventually the public will throw the bums out. That's what we can hope for. But the bums are pretty adept at hanging on to power, through whatever means. Yeah. Well, in the end, see, this is the thing. It's just that there's really nothing to be gained for Europe. The only argument you can make is that the Russians are hell bent on conquering Europe, and so we must stop them there, in Ukraine. But that's just nonsense. It's clear that even in Ukraine, the Russians were very, very reluctant to go in and kept on trying to avoid it, kept on offering different, treaties. And then went in actually with a very limited force. I think partly as a signal show, hey, we're not trying to conquer Ukraine. What we want to do is apply pressure to get this agreement signed. And they almost succeeded at that. So, I mean, it's just, you have to believe in this theory that the Russians are hell-bent on conquering all of Europe. And that would be the only, you say the negative consequence of a defeat of Ukraine. But that's nonsense. There is no negative consequence, for Europe if the Russians have a victory. It's the cost that let's say the losses that Europe has suffered as a result of this war has not been imposed on them by Russia. They're all self-imposed. They've cut themselves off from Russian gas. They've cut themselves off from trade with Russia. They have deprived themselves of investment opportunities in Russia, and they've lost many, many, many billions of dollars. And we're seeing the de-industrialization of Germany. That's the industrial heart of Europe. But these are all self-imposed. So again, it's not that really a Russian victory in Ukraine is going to hurt Europe, but it's just the way that Europe reacts to it.